We'll have Samson in third, Derek here, Howdy here. But Samson proved everyone wrong, and he placed first and got his first Olympia win. So what's your assessment of the top five?
Yeah, I hate to be like terribly agreeable,
Mhm.
but I did think it was all very fair placing,
Yeah.
and there is bias there because I like the previous 212 guys and the shorter guys to do well,
Yes.
and so like I really am a fan of Hadi.
Yeah.
I love the hard graininess that he brings, and I think he's fairly aesthetic as well. However, that wasn't the best Hadi we've seen, and even standing back there with him, like I'm seeing, I'm like,
Okay.
man, he's like surprisingly is pretty soft. I think with Cbum and again, I like short guys, right? So I like open
Yes.
bodybuilding. So it's hard to be like, oh yeah, classic guy can just come in and just wipe out open bodybuilders. You're like,
Yeah.
you kind of don't want to see that happen because you're
No, because then you're like, oh shit.
yeah, classic guys are like,
Yeah.
hell yeah, and Cbum
Yeah.
fans like absolutely. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm a fan of Chris too. Like he's
Mhm.
tremendous physique. So being that physique, he absolutely could beat a lot of tier two open bodybuilders because of the shape, the symmetry, the level of detail that he brings. However, it is open bodybuilding, and I feel like that muscularity aspect is weighed pretty heavily.
Cool. And question here: is bodybuilding healthy or unhealthy?
It's not healthy.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Muscle Discord, and I got a very special guest on the show for the first time, John Jewett. Man, welcome to the show.
Hey, Matt. Well, thank you so much for having me. I've been an avid listener to Muscle Discord, so it's fun to be now on the other side to join in some conversation.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you taking the time. You had a busy schedule. Obviously, you just wrapped up competing at the 2024 Mr. Olympia in the open class. We're going to jump into that in a bit here. But first off, just some quick questions. Maybe there's some people that don't know much about you. There's probably going to be a lot of people that do, but I like to ask the basic questions first. So, what's your current age and height?
Yeah, I'm 38
See,
years. I wasn't expecting that.
there you go.
Like, what's your background of like, where you got started? Yeah,
Yeah.
38 years old, and I am 5'7".
Okay. 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 And so that we'll just jump into the placings now. It's a little bit of recap of your placings. I did a little bit of online research here. Sometimes it's wrong when I do these searches, but 2000, just not a couple years back, just 2021, you got ninth at the 212 Mr. Olympia.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then 20, did you not compete in 2022?
No, I
Okay.
skipped on that competition year.
Okay. And then 2023, first place at the Atlanta Pro 212.
That's right.
Okay. 2023, second place at the Legion Open. We're going to talk about why you made that change. And then 2024 Toronto Pro second place Open.
Mhm.
And then 2024, obviously, the Mr. Olympia 11th place in the Open Olympia.
And there's a Vancouver.
The Van Pro first place.
Yes.
I skipped over that, sorry, which is a huge, big win in my hometown area here. So I wasn't there because I was sick, unfortunately. But and then I got again, obviously, 2024 Mr. Olympia, 11th place, just shy of the top 10, which I had you in predicting you in the top 10. But we'll talk about that. So
And there was
quick,
just my like really one that I loved that I was proud of was the 2019 Olympia 212. I was fourth place there. That was
fourth
my
place.
first Olympia to ever do. So
Yeah, man. So you've been in the mix at the top of your game, even if it's in the 212. You moved into the Open. Now you're, winning an Open show and getting into the Mr. Olympia Open. So, I mean, you must be on cloud nine, first and foremost, living the dream and doing what you're doing and bringing an amazing package. Conditioning is, I think, your key standout point is conditioning, and then obviously fullness, size, roundness. Like you bring a full package. What made you switch from 212 and to move into the open?
Yeah, well, that 2023 year when did the Atlanta Pro, the year before, I had just been dieting for a very, very long time. I was like, I need an off season. That's why I skipped the Olympia, and actually was like, I want to max out 212 and be the best that I can be. So I feel like I hadn't hit that since 2019. So I did the Atlanta show. I was above the weight. I was probably 217 and ready to go. I'm like,
Okay.
all right, let's pull down.
Yeah.
I felt like it was the best 212 I ever hit. And so I was
Mhm.
like, okay, cool. Well, let's do Legion. That's right before the Olympia. The timeline
Yeah.
works out. I'll be the non sucked down version. And I ended up being about 222 on stage there. And
Yeah.
seeing that look, it was so much better than the 212 version. You kind of don't realize how depleted you are and how much you're sacrificing. And seeing that, there was no going back for me. It was just like I only want to be the best version of myself, and that is bodybuilding, right?
Yeah.
So skip the Olympia. Let's go all in on doing the open.
Okay. So you're in the open now. And so what's your kind of average stage weight in these open classes that you can be competing in?
Well, it's kind of been incrementally moving up over this
Good.
past year. At the Olympia, though, I was around 233. And
Okay.
so made past, that's actually been exactly a year with about 10, 11 pounds of just stage weight.
Okay.
So pretty good move up. And that's also with competing and since June and July in those Canadian shows. So
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about the Van Pro. How, that was a big win for you there, qualifying for this year's Mr. Olympia. Tell me about your experience in Vancouver and competing in that show.
well, I didn't think I was going to hit your country so much. I've never
Yeah.
even been to Canada now,
Okay.
twice. And Renee and I are going on. Renee is my wife. We're
Yeah.
going to Banff for
Oh,
vacation.
nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
so
Yes.
lot of Canada for us this year.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, the Vancouver show was great. For one, the weather was nice. So it's a beautiful
It
time
was.
in Canada, and makes me only want to move to like Vancouver area. But I know the show it used to be in Vancouver, now it's
Yeah.
moved to Abbotsford,
Yeah.
which I don't know what it was like before, but it seems like it's a little bit smaller of an auditorium production
Mhm.
site.
Yeah.
I know where they kept us in was kind of like looked like a gymnasium with no
Yeah.
AC. I was really
Yeah.
concerned with. Everyone warned me like, John, like it's going to be hot. So like I brought my personal fan with me, right?
Okay.
Like as a competitor, like do your research about, ask around who's done the shows, what should you bring and prepare with.
Yeah.
So, but they put us on like first in the morning. There was I think there was 10 or 11 of us on go there. So
Yeah.
then check-ins, the head judge, Ron Hatch, he's like, hey, there's only 10 of y'all. I'm gonna work you on stage. Like
Yeah.
it's like shit, all right, well, be ready. And he did, man. I've never posed that much in my life on stage. Running it. Guys were sweating, like
Yeah.
guys were panting, like wastes were coming out, right? So it was fun to get worked and compete that hard.
Yeah.
And I feel like my posing stamina like really was able to shine. The limitation though in Vancouver and even Toronto too is like the stage shows is not quite the best to highlight a physique,
Yeah.
which I especially knew that for Toronto. So it just makes you look off,
It
unfortunately.
does.
Like my pre-stage picks, like leading up, are like, man, John's peeled, he's ready. I'm like, I am. But it doesn't
Yeah.
look like that on stage. It's like, well, John missed the mark. I'm like, man, I didn't miss the mark. It's just how it shows. But
Yeah.
overall, it was a great show. You win it, so it makes it a good show. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And the prize money was a little extra than usual, so that was nice as well.
and cash,
Yeah, cash.
like a stack of cash. Like
Oh, she gave you cash. Wow.
yeah,
So how
not
did you fly? Are you not allowed only 10,000 across the border, or like how did you do that?
she told us that too. So she's like, have Renee take half,
The
and you
friend, yeah,
the other half. Renee's
yeah.
like a rule follower. She was all paranoid about bringing all.
Because yeah, like
We were
they
like,
could seize that money and be like, oh man, like shit. Okay,
it was
but
so
yeah,
funny because that night in the hotel, like there was a show that came on about smuggling, and it was through Canada too, and it was like the cash. And like, oh man, we're gonna get
yeah,
like red flag. I was like, no, it's gonna be fine. So
that's good. Okay, you got it through, and so you won the Van Pro, and then you got started your prep for the Olympia. Now, did you do anything different with your we're going to get into your training and to your university as well and talk about that.
sure.
But what did you do different from the Van Pro to the Olympia prep? Is there anything different or you just continue on as scheduled How does that work for you?
I did do some things different. So, I coach myself. So there's a lot of like self-assessment that needs to go on. And I make mistakes all the time and I keep learning from them too. Toronto, I was a bit heavier. I was like 230 and I really liked that look. And after that, I had started pulling down, making some like changes around like the drug stack design, right? I was lowering testosterone down. I lowered growth hormone down and that looked good for Toronto. I kept doing that into Vancouver a bit more, and I ended up being like 227 in Vancouver.
Okay.
But it just didn't look the same. Like I didn't have the fullness. For some reason, my glutes weren't like coming through with full lines.
Yeah.
But it was better in certain ways. But still, I made some changes I shouldn't have for that show. And so going back, like my second eye is Luke Miller. He's another coach in my business and also an educator in J3U. So I always send him stuff like, man, fact check me. Like, am I doing all right? So he's like, hey, past data, man, like you do good with like high testosterone, high growth hormone running all the way to the show. So that's what I did. Brought those back up. Fullness came way back and the muscles like pushing hard in the skin.
Yeah.
And I looked leaner because of it too. So that was a 12-week gap between there and Olympia. So I'm like, well, I'm going to take 6 weeks and I kind of reverse engineer my timeline, right? I know how long it takes me to get so lean so I can bring my body weight up X amount before I need to pull it back down. So I came up to about 239 over the first 6 weeks and then started coming back down to where it would be like something I would go on stage with. And it's kind of where I ended up back down to like 233. So heavier than my earlier showings and arguably the best balance of everything with fullness and condition.
Yes. And that experience, the 60th anniversary of Olympia, what was that like for you? Like, what was the highlight of that weekend for you?
And the highlight, it has to be just walking on stage, like the first step and look out onto that stage. Because I did the 2019 Olympia when it was in Vegas, then COVID happened. And they did the best they could to get an Olympia, right? But it still felt like it was another pro show in like like an auditorium or a conference center, so expo center, right? So this one was my first one back for me in Vegas, and it was just immense. Like there was 4 tiers of audience in there, like so high up, it's like the nosebleeds, right? You can barely even see what's going on. It felt like the whole world was watching you in that moment, and you're just walking out for them to watch you, and that's it. It felt like you were like a Roman gladiator in the Colosseum back in the day, right? Like everyone's here just to see you like go to town with your sport. So that feeling is just something that's very hard. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about it because it's such a defining and validating moment for everything you be doing and being recognized, kind of self-satisfaction of like, wow, I made it, and everything I have been doing has been come to a reason, a point. So it's like I compare it to like if you were like climb on top of Mount Everest and like you're there and you see the world, right? So it's the same type of feeling. So definitely that would be it.
Okay. And your goal for that Olympia, what was your goal? Did you reach your goal in placings wise, looks wise? How was that for you?
My goal used to be placings in bodybuilding, and it left me very discouraged at times. First pro card, like going for nationals in 2015, I was like, I'm going to win. I'm going to get a pro card. I didn't get a pro card. Made me very angry, very upset, right? So now, like, I have to judge success off things that are more in my control, which for me, in 2020, I got on stage with a terrible look. I hated it. I said I'll never do that again. And so my success is always bring a better version to stage and just nailing it, right? And that was the Olympia. Like if I'm going to nail it anytime, if I could walk away from competing at this moment, I want it to feel like that. Like I know I did and could nail it, right? So and have good stage picks. Dear Lord, have good stage picks. So that was my success. Like I nailed it, I felt like at the Olympia with condition. The muscularity is what it was, but I presented it well with posing and everything. So for me, that was the success I had. And I saw my stage picks and I was finally like happy to see them. Now placings, it's the first time the Open. So in a way, there's not as much expectation. I think we might've talked. I kind of had my idea that I could be 8th to 12th, I thought, which some guys are off, or I could scooch in, or I might get out. And landing 11th, it was kind of it made sense to me.
Yeah.
So from there, though, now there's kind of an expectation. So I ideally would like to be in the top 10. I
Yeah.
feel like around the top 10, you don't get really spoken about much, even though you might have done a lot and nailed a look or whatnot. But so
Yeah.
still, those are goals moving forward, right? Always beat the last version of John, and then move up in placing as a secondary goal.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, I think you're right on the cusp there. I could have had you in the top 10. I think your physique is so complete, and the conditioning you bring, the dryness is just on another level. Which that's hard work, and we're gonna jump into that. First, I know you're also a fan of bodybuilding. So, what was your take on the top 5 placings in the men's open? Do you agree with them? Do you think I would have this guy here, or was it the solid? Because there was some people didn't have Samson. A lot of the like Chris Cormier and all the predictions, they were like, we'll have Samson in third, Derek here, Hadi here. But Samson proved everyone wrong, and he placed first and got his first Olympia win. So what's your assessment of the top 5?
Yeah, I hate to be like terribly agreeable, but I did think it was all very fair placing.
Yeah.
And there is bias there because I like the previous 212 guys and the shorter guys to do well.
Yes.
And so like I really am a fan of Hadi. I love the hard graininess that he brings, and I think he's fairly aesthetic as well. However, that wasn't the best Hadi we've seen, and even standing back there with him, like I'm seeing him, like man, he's like surprisingly is pretty soft. I think you'd be surprised that a lot of the open guys were pretty soft, but when he hits his poses, like a lot comes to life still, So it's the balance, because some guys get harped up like, well, you're not conditioned, you shouldn't even win. Like, no, this is like a balance of everything put together as a whole. Yeah. So I do think Samson brought the best version of all those attributes on the day: symmetry, shape, structure. I mean, his structure is so large, it's overpowering.
Yeah.
Muscularity and good enough condition, which I think was very on par for everyone.
Yeah.
I personally, though, I almost think Martin and Derek could have been flipped.
Yes.
And very close.
Very close.
Derek just didn't seem quite as balanced this year, with legs either down or upper body was up so much, right? It could have been one or the other, but Martin seemed like very balanced, very competitive condition wise, and muscularity's very well hanging with Derek. So I think overall that was a fair layup of placings.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, good assessment. I agree with that. I mean, I had Hadi winning, but I feel like what you're saying with Samson, he has the overall aspect of everything that he brings to the table, and well deserved win for Samson Dauda. Let's talk about your J3 university and the fact that you do prep yourself, which is crazy because everyone has a guru coach nowadays. And
it's only Cbum. They only have Boss of Outlaws.
Yeah.
So like everyone's jumping to him now, right? Like
yeah. Basically, he's gonna have everybody pretty much.
He's the only coach now.
It's crazy. I don't know how we were talking about that on with Phil Clayhar and Ron Harris on. We're talking about like how does he keep up with? And maybe you can chime in because you do it. You coach a ton of people. I mean, with the university and you train a lot of people. So maybe you can chime in on that. How to manage that athletes and contest prep for other people. So tell me a little bit about J3 University, how you got that started, and it's blown up. So dive into it with that.
Yeah, it was. I've had the idea for a while. I think it was in like 2018 or so. I always put out on Instagram like my training, and I always had some type of explanation of why I was doing the things I was doing. So it became of like, once you keep asking the whys, and basically that's bodybuilding, right? Like we are kind of scientists in our own ways of putting something to test. We're kind of assessing it, then we make some changes and reassess it. Like that's the scientific approach. I know there's always this battle between bros and the science crowd, but if you're doing bodybuilding right, hopefully you have some science application to a degree, or you're just going to keep banging rocks like a caveman and not know anything. But anyway, that's kind of like how my Instagram was putting out content of explanations of why I would do things, and people start asking questions, and eventually become the guy with some answers. And I had clients that I was coaching, and you get the same questions all the time, like, man, if I had like a database of all this education stuff, then I could just send my clients there and they can learn.
Okay.
I had 2 failed attempts. It took me 2 years of finding the right web developer of what I would even need. Money spent, time wasted. And I finally came across my partner in this. His name's Mark Fox. He developed trainedbyjp.com, so Jordan Peters' website.
Yes.
Joe Bennett's website, hypertrophycoach.com. Also Eugene Teo, the Kabuki method.
Okay.
He also worked with campjansen.com when that first came out too. So very successful, very great web developer and brand marketer. So I finally found the right guy.
Yeah.
I explained what I was trying to do, this education kind of like database. Like, that sounds a lot like a school. Like, people could learn along the way everything about bodybuilding. I'm like, yeah, I guess so. He's like, so we kind of had the idea of like, well, let's make it like that. Which was like, we finally had direction. And that was where 2020, which kind of worked out because it was COVID. I shot while I was prepping for the Olympia and everything. I shot all the videos for J3U, which basically what it's become now is take you from the beginning of what you need to know in bodybuilding, from assessing someone off stage, and also all the client coaching tools you need. So all the fundamentals of coaching, or whether you're an athlete, what you need to know to improve as an athlete, into nutrition, training, sleep and stress management, to learn PDs, to learn how to manage your health on PDs or being natural, and putting that all in together. And how do you coach the full off-season, contest prep, post-show period? So it's literally everything you'd want to know about self-coaching, improving as an athlete, or if you're trying to coach others too. And so that's the entirety of J3U. We have some other little courses too, like the call it muscle mastery. So this is like us in the gym improving exercises and cueing to get more out of every rep. We also have the female module, which is it takes our level 1 course, which is all the basics. And I feel like females are a niche of their own because there's so many, it's more complicated. So we address all the female coaching stuff, what a female athlete would need to know in that. So that's where that's kind of all become. It's my passion project that's turned into something really large. And we've sent, I have a number of pros. Like I've been in pro lineups where guys are like, hey, I'm taking J3U. I'm like, shit, I should kick you out because I'd be learning too much.
You might surpass me here. That's awesome. Like, how many do you mind like sharing how many like members you have, or is it like is that?
No, I don't mind. People are going to do the calculator math, but we've had about 4,000 people go.
Wow. Jeez. So that's awesome. Congratulations on that. That's huge, man. Like, you're changing the industry by doing something like that, by providing like a university style course for people to learn from and incorporate your methods and, hands-on. Like, that's cool. That's really, really cool what you're doing and changing the game and being innovative. So that's what it's about.
And it's not just science jargon and theory. Like, I put my case studies and client case studies in there, so you'll see it applied. And what I care more about is like, and what we all care about is results, right? Like, I don't care what a scientific study says if it doesn't make a result. So it's always like results first, but I'll explain the why so you understand how to apply it yourself. Man, can you imagine we had this like 10 years ago?
Man.
We didn't have anything.
We'd have a lot more successful bodybuilders on the stage if we had this back in the day. Yeah, for sure. But let's talk a little bit about your training philosophy and like nutrition philosophy. Because you are shredded all the time. How do you do it? What are you doing 2 hours of cardio? What do you do? What's the trick to stay?
Lots of drugs.
Lots of clen and T3s and
That's a trend. That's what people would be like. Oh, well, that makes sense. Then they believe me. But no, I mean, I've done off seasons where I have gotten pretty fat and pushed an aggressive calorie surplus, but it also cost me having to do a much longer prep and turn. I think to maintain like your post show period is just so essential, and you can blow your off season within the first few weeks of post show. So what I did really intentionally this last season was trying just incrementally bring up body weight. And in this post-show period, which be post-show would be also low in PDs, but being the leanest I can be with also fully recovered from all the prep craziness that happens, right? Poor sleep, like crap libido, food focus, like all those things I didn't want present. What's the leanest point I can stay at? And it happened to be pretty lean. And I think that will start shifting as you get more advanced because you can manage being that lean a lot better. If you have like 2 jobs, stressful environment, relationships, and all these things added up, like your ceiling to manage like fatigue is going to be really low, and you won't be able to keep a lean body fat because of this. So my environment's been built around bodybuilding at this point. So, and I've also leveraged a lot of my time with my education course, and we now have a coaching team, J3 coaching. So I don't coach people anymore. So it's all bodybuilding focused. So that sets up an environment for me to be very successful. And I ended post show staying like very lean, and I didn't put in a lot of calories to begin with. So I think I've only had like 250-gram carb increases across like a entire 4-month block. And that keeps me gaining a pound of body weight each week, which people are like, why'd you stay so lean? Like, why don't you gain more fat? You gain more muscle. Like, dude, I was gaining a pound a week. Like that's a stellar rate. And you see, like, I was like 11 pounds heavier on stage. So if I need to get more aggressive, I would, but body weight's moving up and I'm staying lean. So why not? I would definitely say though, like this past season, keeping in cardio all year long was a huge thing that I hadn't done in the past. Steady state drops off for me. I hate it. And but I love HIIT. So I'm like, I'm gonna do HIIT. So I was doing HIIT cardio 4 days a week, which was like jumping on the spin bike. I would do an all-out sprint for 1 minute. I would do rest a minute, then do battle ropes for a minute. And I would do like 6 sets of that. So it would take me like 12 minutes after I train, quick. It doesn't impede my workouts and recovery. And that's what kept me sustainable like all off season long. And I would say the last point, I'll let you, I don't want to go on here rambling. For moving from 212 to open, I had never really leveraged like growth hormone much because of the body weight restriction. And man, moving that up was a large factor for me in size, but also your ability to manage staying leaner too, and partitioning a lot of that towards muscle. And like all those factors combined kept me very lean. And I think genetically, I probably have a predisposition to also stay pretty lean, and turn also probably get pretty conditioned.
So when you say lean, what's your expectation body fat percentage wise in the off season versus obviously contest season? You're probably trying to be in the 5% or under range, and then off season, what would you want to be in? So people have an idea, because if people say, "Oh, I'm just lean," that could be a range of different things.
Sure. I like to give some context for people. Like you should be able to diet for a bodybuilding show at least within 20 weeks. And if you're getting beyond that, so this is previous competitors, you should know this data. If you need more than that, well, likely you'll need some fat loss phase before that happens, which that's probably getting too soft for many people, which visually is what matters. How does that look? Well, likely if you're a bodybuilder, I think you should have full abs year round. You also have quad lines from top of the hip to the knee year round. I think once you get beyond that, like, hey, I'm kind of can't really see a lot of ab outline, probably getting over 15% body fat, which is going to take you over 20 weeks to diet that much off. Now, some people do have a higher fat set point, and I've had guys where, and also guys that don't manage their environment well, they have a lot of stress or whatnot, that they do have to accept being at a higher body fat level, and we might have to have like a little fat loss phase before we actually get into prep. But in general, I would say like, hey, operating between like 12 to maybe 16, 17% body fat is a good range. You get to that upper end, like pull it back down, then restart your off season, build back up. For me, I probably hit that 12-ish%, like my top end, and then pull it back down. It's why I can probably run a pretty short prep, but also not a very aggressive prep, which I think is key as well if you want to maintain a lot of that tissue dieting.
What's a short prep? So people are like, okay, well, he's saying short prep. What does that mean? Is it 4 weeks? Like, that's why I always chime in on those things. So people who are listening, like, oh, it's actually this long when he says that. So yeah.
I had programmed in to prep for Toronto, or I should say I was going to do Texas actually. And I started dieting and I was lean in 7 weeks, which I'm like, oh, okay. I just started ripping down. Right. So eating more refeeds. And then I was like, well, I'll do Vancouver. Then I'm thinking like, you know what? I could do Toronto. And so I just let that ride out. So a 7-week prep into Toronto is what actually happened. That's a short prep to me.
Yeah. Very short.
For most people, most people probably aren't prepping for 12 weeks, but I think 16 is kind of a norm for a lot of people. Coming from if you had a long off season, but I know guys that they just have short off seasons and they can prep
Go
quicker.
right in. Yeah.
Right. So, I'd say 12 is on getting towards the shorter side, and then anything above that kind of gets normal. And I have females that they have to do like 24 plus week preps, which some people have a hard time accepting that when they hear me doing my prep. But sometimes you'll have a female on 24-week prep, they're still not ready, and they're better for their second show. And you're like, well, actually, that was a 28-week prep, and maybe that's where you should start. So, just prep based on what you need and your ability to sustain that deficit. Because especially those females, you can't rush them off at the end. It ends with them stalling out and getting more issues post show. So
when you're during your 7-week prep, how much cardio are you doing during your prep?
Yeah, so when I went into prep, I was still doing that HIIT cardio. So it was 4 sessions a week, about 12 minutes long. At some point, I could feel that I was starting to kind of hold on to training. So, and then total fatigue was getting higher. I could feel as far as like my hips were taking attacks in my knees. So I really utilized steps throughout off season, throughout prep to utilize for just an easy way to burn calories. It's time consuming, but easy. So at that point, when I was about 7 to 8 weeks out, is when I just pulled out the HIIT cardio. And I just started increasing my steps in turn and went only to using steps. And so I went up to using 15,000 steps a day, which about 2,000 steps is like walking a mile. So you're looking about, hey, I'm doing like 7.5 miles per day. And that was enough to sustain the fat loss rate that I needed. And it's great for managing fatigue if you don't have to do like direct cardio and you can save your legs. But that's the point of when people have to get into like too quick of fat loss rates. You have to do cardio. You're probably going to be sacrificing training and in turn sacrificing some muscle tissue. So
and are you a believer that doing too much cardio will strip away muscle tissue? Even if you're on the PEDs, the growth, the protein is high, can you still strip away muscle tissue?
I've seen it happen. So yes, but I think it's a very poorly managed prep when that does occur, because all those drugs present, if you have a good timeline and you're not having to take it there, you should be able to manage it. But if you have the guy with like genetically legs are already a struggle point, trying to run a short prep, things happen, stalls happen. Yeah, you still could like have someone legs like get lost a bit on prep, even with all those conditions. So
and generally, what's your macros, your carbs, protein, fats during let's stick with that 7-week prep range. What were you kind of dieting on?
Sure. Yeah. A lot of times the lowest I was getting was around 300 grams of carbs per day. And I'd sit around 40 to 50 grams of fat. So I run fairly low fats, and then around 300 grams of protein. So not terribly low. It's very sustainable. My off days carbs would cut in half. And,
good point.
Don't get me wrong. I've done wild preps before. I've done 1,500 calorie preps with a ton of cardio. A lot of times that was before I knew about tracking steps. So I was working at home coaching, right? So I'd sit on the couch. I'd work on the computer. I go train. Probably getting like 3,000 steps a day. I'm like, I don't know why I have to keep dieting so low food. Like, you don't move all day long. But the idea back then was like, preserve yourself for your weight training, right? So now I have a walking pad.
I was going to ask, what are you doing? Are you going out for walks, or are you just treadmill, or to get your steps in?
It's a mix of both, but this past prep, I got a walking pad, and man, it's a game changer. I can just get like 20 minutes of walking like after each meal. It's great for digestion, great for posture, and I easily hit my step count for the day. Now,
walking pad. Is it just like a thing that kind of slides on the floor while you stand in position?
I can literally just slide it in and out really easily. It's lightweight, and this desk, like you saw it moves up. So I'll just raise my desk, pull the pad in, and walk for a bit, drop it back down.
Walking pad.
Got it on Amazon for like $180, and this one has a 300-pound capacity, so I'm going to be good for a little bit. But, but I'll do side too. I live out in the country here in Texas, so we'll take the dogs out and we'll walk a bit. But I will say, walking on like asphalt or even gravel on the side of the road, it does beat me up a bit more. So these treadmill pads, like they're very cushioned, so even
Cool.
walking, even though it's pretty low impact, it can still be fatiguing when you're a heavy guy and doing a lot
Yeah.
of it. So
Yeah. So the season's done now, and I guess you're in off-season mode, I would think. And did you get any feedback from the judges? Like, okay, what do you need to work on? What did they like? What's your game plan for 2025?
yeah, so I actually I did. I reached out to Tyler and he
Yeah,
emailed me, and
cool.
his feedback was, well, hell, I'll read it to you. I have it. I pulled it
Yeah,
up quick.
awesome. Yeah,
Hey, I thought you looked incredible and brought some great condition stage. Everything you've been doing has clearly been working, so I'll continue on that path. Then you can work on adding more thickness to your chest and more depth and thickness to your back. I think your waist and abs look the best they have, but I would still continue working on bringing that waistline in as much as possible with being like deeper, more developed abs. He said, I thought your waist control was better Friday and let it slip a
yeah,
little bit on Saturday. So
yeah,
I did ask him on this something on my other judges of the like Vancouver. They were saying like, hey, more quad sweep to build out more X frame. I asked him about that, like my ab and thigh shot or
yeah,
my side chest. He's like your side leg looks really good. Like you don't need
yeah.
more hamstring. He's like I think just more overall is proportionate, but they're not standout because you have like big enough legs.
Yes, you do
That
have stand up. Your legs are one of your stronger points. So yeah.
So I have a lot of adductor, which
Mhm.
gives a lot of like takes up a
Thick-
lot of space on stage.
Yeah.
I just don't have a lot of sweep, and I think partially that is I've torn both of my rec fems
Oh wow. Okay.
in prep doing the same exercise. So it to contract the leg to show it, you really like need to contract down the rec fem, and it kind of
Yeah.
spreads the quad apart. So that one's a pretty hard for me, and I lose it a lot of times on stage, the contraction, but it's still improving every
Yeah.
year. And I've gone back to some exercises where I've shied away from because of the injury,
Yeah.
and I'm actually correcting probably the root issues of what causes the injuries now.
Yeah.
So I have a really good rehab movement specialist here in San Antonio that I work with.
Okay. Okay.
But
And so, is there any shows you have in mind, or are you just waiting before you announce anything, or do you already like? Are you the guy that's like, I need to know I'm doing this show next, or this, or
um,
has it even come out yet? The list. I don't know if it was even announced. Did it?
yeah, I haven't seen it come out yet.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
definitely the planner. Like before I even did the Olympia, I already am in planning.
Yeah.
I know what I did last year was great progress, and likely I was thinking, well, it might not be as much progress because I'm more developed now. So I was like, oh, like a little bit more time would be nice. However, I do think I can repeat very close to what I did. Um, and because looking back, I'm already like close to 240, and usually like 7 weeks post show is when I like push the throttle down again and go up. And last year I was at 232. So I'm like, I'm on track to be still 10 pounds heavier in the off season. So
Okay.
what I planned out anyway, long story short, is I planned out a little bit longer of like a push phase. So that should land me in the fall.
Okay.
And I would really like to go to Europe. I think that would be so cool. And
Yeah.
take Renee and we'll go do like Italy, then go to London, and then maybe France. Just stay over there for like a month, have like a whole
Cool.
tour of Europe, and it would be quite the experience. The only thing though is that I do prep quick, and I've already laid out a timeline that probably gives me more time than I need. And if that was the case, I would love to do Texas. It's in my home
Yeah.
state, and it's an awesome show. Like
Yeah.
that production team, they put a great stage. You get great stage photos, and the
Yeah.
end of all this, all you're left with is stage photos. So I really would like some awesome ones. Nothing. I don't. Who knows what the other shows will be this next year, but that's kind of the tentative
Yeah.
plan.
Okay.
So I hit something later in the year, and it gives me a real big chunk of time to improve. I think for guys that are similar in structure to me and build, probably being closer to that 240 mark on stage would be
Yep.
where I would need to be. Um,
Yeah.
like talk with Martin. Martin's like 235 on stage, which yeah, you think he could be 250 on stage.
Yeah.
He's built different than me for sure. I think you look more like a John De La Rosa or maybe even Hadi potentially, like a little larger structures, right? But
Yeah.
I might need to be up in that 240 mark or so.
Okay. Definitely. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the general plan.
Okay. Okay. Switching gears here. Since you're doing well on social media and you're kind of really heavily involved in it on for bodybuilding wise. Social media in bodybuilding, is it good or bad?
It's a mix, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely has provided more of a platform for the sport, like for yourself. Like we
Mhm.
would have people like yourself to be able to even have the media production of bodybuilding. We were left just to magazines at one point.
Yeah.
So it's definitely given a platform for media outlets to become available for us to watch shows all year long and have great feedback. So I think that's tremendous for the growth of sport. Also, from the athlete perspective, being able to build your own brand and create monetary income through coaching or whatever means you want, gaining more sponsors. Kind of the negative with it, though, is that it does come with also diluting sponsorship money. It used to be
Mhm.
if you were a pro, like you get like really stellar contracts, and those quite aren't available anymore.
Yeah.
And a lot of contracts now are more based on your influence over your accomplishments. You could have some guy that's never even stepped on stage or done anything, just this could be a good looking guy and he gets a lot of
Yeah.
money. So there's that, and then there's also uh, the negative around like the mental aspect in bodybuilding. Like you have to have a bit of a tougher skin because people are going to tear you apart. They can just now do it easily behind a screen
Yeah.
versus when you probably never hear from them to begin with. So,
No.
um, so I mean, there's that. It kind of like can have some aspects around like the mental health side, but I think as a whole, I mean, it doesn't even matter what we really discuss on it because it's
Mhm.
happening. It's only going to progress further. But I think in the big picture, it's like definitely push the sport forward. I would say in a positive.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely a lot more eyeballs on the sport, and it's just bringing more attention to everyone and giving people more access to guys like you with the knowledge and the experience that you have. So that's a huge part of it as well. That
It does seem like it's diluted a bit of like meeting pros because when I went to my first show, it was
Yeah.
here in San Antonio, the Lackland Classic. It's been going on since the '80s. They'd have like Ronnie come, Phil Heath. So my first bodybuilding ever show, like I went because Ronnie Coleman was going to guest post here, and
Yeah.
it was mind blowing, right? Like I've never seen a human like that. But now in social media, you see them all the time. Like they're almost humanized, where before it seemed mystic, like they were
Yes.
superhuman, right? So
Yeah.
now you don't see like they don't have people come guest post much anymore. It's not very common, and
Yeah.
the show turnouts aren't like they used to be either.
That's
So
true.
money's gone down as far as like giving to athletes to come out and
Mhm.
guest post, which I think that there's should be a lot of emphasis put on having the in-person experience, especially
Yeah.
with like AI technology coming out. It's going to be hard to disseminate now of like what's real and what's
Yeah.
not. So I think just making those opportunities available again would be huge for people to interact.
Okay. Yeah, I agree, and like definitely, the crowds aren't as big because now we have the online. You can watch the live streams and stuff, so that's kind of taking away from it too. But you are kind of reaching more people that way through the live streams. But
Have you
yeah,
seen some other negatives? Do you have some other negatives with social media that you want to think?
I actually agree. Like I think the negative would be like the negative criticism that you might get that you may not hear if you didn't have access to social media, right? You just have your friends around you and they tell you what you need to hear, but then you have people online that may disagree with your placing or how you looked on stage and they kind of critique you that way. And then you take that pressure or even Nick Walker, he's got a lot of pressure. People are like, man, you missed another Olympia. Like what's going on? Like, okay. And like, and he hears that, he loses his coach and then he's hearing that and all the news channels are talking about it and you see it everywhere. Like it could get to you. I could see how it could get to people, but you
You
gotta have thick
think
skin.
a lot, but a lot there'll
Yeah.
be like that one person that'll say the one thing that just touches your button just right and will
Yeah.
set you off for the day. I think people should just be mindful that man, there's humans on the other side of this thing. Like try to treat people nicely, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I agree. And the opposite of that is bodybuilders that will go on their IG stories and they're emotional. They just finished the show and they're not happy and they start talking to IG and then that gets out and it just causes drama. So it's definitely changed on both ends. Some of these guys will go on their IG and just let it rip and you're like, what were you thinking with that? And like, anyways, but that's the difference now. People can vent and it might come back to you if you do that. So
you definitely need to be more
yeah,
guarded with like what you put out. Like it seems like an easy platform to let loose and
yeah,
be transparent, but when you're trying to build a personal brand,
yeah,
if that's what you are as a bodybuilder, everything's going to matter, and people remember that stuff if you impacted them like in an emotional way. So, and that's huge for us to like drive income. So I'm always really mindful of how I come across and be real and transparent. Like that's what's going to connect with people.
Yeah, definitely. Off topic here a little bit. Some of your hobbies. Are you just a pure like bodybuilder, eat, sleep, and train, or are you into some other type of thing like that no one really knows about?
Yeah, I'm an avid painter. I play the drums.
Wow. There you
Sorry,
go.
I wish I had something else. I'm a total bore, man. I am so all in on bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Bodybuilding is my hobby, my career, and everything involved with it.
Okay.
I wish there was more that I did, but yeah, it's so limiting, like other
Yeah.
things that I would enjoy. I love cars. I have I have a 68 Mustang Fastback that is my other baby besides Renee, but I love the car and been rebuilding that and putting this time into it. I got it because I'm like, I'm going to pick up this hobby. I can work on cars. And I quickly realized that I really suck mechanically. And I was spending had to do things over 3 times and spend a lot of money. So now I just let me just do bodybuilding and I'll pay someone else to help me build the car out. But that's it. And with Renee, we love the outdoors. So doing trips to go see nature and hikes like that is stuff that fits within the bodybuilding realm.
Yeah.
But the reality of it at this level, you have to be kind of all in at every moment in bodybuilding. And I don't see myself as the genetic wonder per se. They're good, right? I'm not the Olympia stage, but I don't want to leave any opportunity. I'm never going to bank on genetic. I think people that bank on their genetics would be crazy because everyone has that. So how do you outwork someone? Well, that's when your daily looks like nonstop bodybuilding. But I don't want anyone to think out there that you can't have enjoyability in doing this and make it very sustainable. I love my life and we everything I do. If you see my food and stuff, I love to cook and make get inventive with recipes as well. So that's kind of a hobby also. But I made bodybuilding to where I love to do it. And I think that's where you can really excel. But as soon as I'm done, who knows what will be my next venture. I'll do something.
Cool. And question here, is bodybuilding healthy or unhealthy?
It's not healthy. I'll say that. Yeah, for sure. It's there's not a way to do this without taking health risk. I think that's for any sport though, it is, you could argue health for any extreme side of a sport because there's going to be degrees of joint wear and tear, and someone could say that's unhealthy. Or I love watching sport documentaries when I'm in prep and stuff, and some of these sports are wild what they do.
Concussions and stuff,
name it. Any sport, there's crazy risk involved, and there's even drugs involved with a lot of sports too. Now, absolutely, hell yeah, we're using enhancements, taking big body weights. It's not a healthy endeavor. So, but you also don't have to be risk adverse and stupid about it either. And that's kind of what I teach in J3U. It's try to have just sound logic in what we do and be able to, when you are making these choices, you can explain the whys behind what you're doing. So it's not just a copy paste of some crazy drug protocol. And then also I'm huge on health monitoring and giving you the resources you need to be checking along the way. I think of it as if your car has check engine lights, well, these are doing your labs every 16 weeks, doing echocardiograms or monitoring your blood pressure. So if a engine light goes off, you're change your oil, stupid, to where you don't wind up on the side of the road with your smoke coming out of your car, right? So we should be monitoring these things and not doing this mindlessly. So but yeah, do you agree? Do you think it's healthy or unhealthy?
I agree. I think obviously the drug protocol and the extreme dieting and the water manipulation and putting ourselves through that is not healthy. But I also think what is healthy is the willpower, the consistency you learn from training and getting to a routine. It definitely helped me when I used to compete. Now I have a business and I put that from competing into my business, and the repetitions and the consistency and the persistency. I take that as that's healthy side of bodybuilding.
I really like that point, because if I had to see hey, I have an early demise of some sort, could I look back and be okay with that And before I did bodybuilding, and I worked in the hospital like a 9 to 5. I was a clinical dietitian, worked in the ICU, and my like vision of what that would be like would be getting maybe a little bit more money, not much. I would get by, and I'd be very just okay in life. And I would rather take the risk and have a shorter life, but a wild one where at some moment I walk on the Olympia stage, right? And every moment I'm moving to this like best version of myself as a whole human, like how I interact with people, what I do in the world, how I impact people, right? Like that's healthy to me as well. So what the other version of John, I don't know if that is healthy, maybe organ wise,
Yes.
but mental health wise and also happiness wise, I don't think I would be. And so it is what it is. Like this is what I do, and I've taken risk. I'll probably reap what I sow as far as that goes, but I had a hell of a ride, and won't have regrets.
No. If anyone's doing it the way you're doing it is probably as healthy as you can do it because you're so on it with the monitoring and like you said, the red check engine light and all that stuff. You're on it. So you're not doing it, without any intention of looking after your body and taking care of yourself as best you can while you do this.
Yeah,
So
and I don't really think like that's like because people criticize me because I'm like 212, like you haven't done the open, like you don't know what that would be like. And so part of this was also show like this is how you would take it to the open and still do this because I don't see it as like reducing your risk by doing these other aspects as taking you away from being optimal. I think it's more so because I think a healthier physique or less risky physique, you're able to sustain growth periods for longer period of times. Like you don't endure the same like issues that crop up from PD use or guys that have GI issues or you name it, like lipids going out of whack or blood pressure. Like when you're managing these things, you can sustain bodybuilding and be more productive with growth and prep as well. So I see it as an improvement in the process over any type of detriment from optimal.
yeah. Speaking of moving to open, we're almost just about to wrap it up here. Cbum doing the Prague Pro this weekend. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's saying, Cbum's classic. Can he really move in the open and battle these guys, especially Martin Fitzwater, fourth in the world right now? What's your take on it? As an open bodybuilder, can Cbum actually beat Martin Fitzwater and win the Prague Pro?
I have Martin winning. Just
Okay.
off to say that.
Yeah.
I think with Cbum and again, I like short guys, right? So I like open
Yes.
bodybuilding. So it's hard to be like, oh yeah, classic guy can just come in and just wipe out open bodybuilders. You're like, you kind of don't want to see that happen because
because then you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, classic guys are like, hell yeah, and Cbum fans like absolutely. And I'm a fan of Chris too. Like he's a tremendous physique. So being that physique, he absolutely could beat a lot of tier 2 open bodybuilders because of the shape, the symmetry, the level of detail that he brings. However, it is open bodybuilding, and I feel like that muscularity aspect is weighed pretty heavily.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you're really going to see it, that discrepancy in several shots that are like his front lat spread, his side chest are extremely good. However, where you get exposed will be like the front double.
Yeah.
And when he turns around, I think that's when you're going to see that weight discrepancy. I'm sure I've seen people say like he's the same height as Samson, and Samson's 300 pounds.
Yeah, 40 pounds.
Maybe 250, right? So
yeah.
Now not to say that he needs to be 300 pounds. It's a different structure, but just to say like there is a pretty big weight gap there, which I think you'll see standing next to him, next to someone like I think Martin's a great person to stand next to because he's also a very aesthetic guy too.
Yes, tiny waist, good. He hits classic shots too, so it's kind of.
I don't think he's as detailed as Chris. No. I don't know if Chris is going to sacrifice much detail just being fuller. I think I would think they would know how to tread that line.
Yeah.
But I don't see him beating Martin. As far as like who else?
Clarita, Sean Clarita is in there. Horse MD.
Yeah.
Those would be the top guys that he's going to be up against.
I think he'll beat Sean and Horse. What was Horse's last showing? It still seems like he just really needs a back development there. Yeah. That is such a big piece that he's missing. And then with Sean, I mean, he is one of the best 212 guys and brings a lot of detail. But I still think the height discrepancies of how you take Cbum on stage might just overpower Sean. And Chris still brings a ton of detail, which is kind of Sean's thing too. Although he is very muscular, but I feel like Chris's aesthetics and structural kind of overpower that.
Yeah, I mean, Sean has beaten like Regan Grimes and Sergio Oliva Jr. in the past in an open show, but this is Cbum, okay, different level in a sense of conditioning and muscularity that he would have over, say, Regan and Sergio. But yeah,
Regan, Sergio, they're good and they're big guys too. But yeah, I think Chris still comes in so much sharper than both of those guys in that show, and
it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting for sure. Excited to watch it this weekend. And so we'll wrap it up there. Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to? Any sponsors or anyone you want to give a shout out to?
Oh man, I feel like I run my own podcast. I haven't done shout out in a while. Sure, yeah. Let me shout out to Animal. Has been I've been with them for 8 years, which is pretty wild. Which a lot of sponsors don't hang you on.
No, man, you've seen people.
I went up there to Jersey this weekend with the other Evan Senapani. He's been with them for 20 years. Imagine that. So they're like the backbone in the industry, I feel like. So huge shout out to them. And also Merrick Health I've worked with now for the past year, and has been awesome to coordinate with them to manage health and give bodybuilders a non-judgmental resource to manage all these areas. And then also to everyone that's in my J3U, my coaches and all my staff, like I couldn't do what I do at the level that I do it at without everyone. So thank you guys.
Awesome. Last question before I forgot this one. You're the greatest bodybuilder of all time, in your opinion.
Oh, I really like Phil Heath.
Can
I give some like
context?
I would say I love Dorian as far as his offstage execution of everything. But as far as the physique goes, Phil Heath is pretty awesome. I love Ronnie, but I feel like he was an era when they were really pushing size, and the waist thing kind of kills me. And Phil Heath, for a lot of those years, he
kept it.
Yeah, he kept it really good. So
awesome. Okay, awesome. Well, man, I appreciate your time. This was a really informative conversation, and people are going to get a lot of value from this interview. I think so. I appreciate you coming on, brother, and I hope to have you on again.
Well, thank you, Matt, and appreciate it. And we'll keep supporting Muscle Discord.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, guys, we will catch you on the next one. Peace.